Thank you, everyone, for joining here today for what is our first public appearance of the DAC Innovation Talks. I'd just like to set the stage of what we're going to do at these Innovation Talks, so people are well aware about the purpose of these. We have run a few of these internally, but now we're ready to go public with these. And I'll just like to then put kind of the frame around why we're doing these. So we are taking this opportunity to invite innovative initiatives, consortia, researchers, regulatory and governmental agencies to present ongoing work related to health data science. So the purpose of doing that is really to raise the awareness of initiatives that both locally here in the greater Copenhagen region, but also globally are related to life science in this kind of broadest defined term as we can define it. As long as it's innovative and it has health data and advanced analytics as part of the topic, we would really like to feature it here and give a podium for people to present. We really hope that will foster an interest and a knowledge sharing about health data science and innovation in that field, not only here for the Copenhagen area, but definitely for the greater global interest. And then for the ability for these initiatives to reach out to each other and kind of draw the lines between the dots and get even more out of the work we each are doing. So if you have an initiative that you would like to have featured in one of these talks, please do feel free to reach out to us. And you have Lars's email here, who's also chaperoning us through the meeting today, LRAN. At dkma.dk, and we'll get in touch with you about how to make this work for one of these sessions. A disclaimer I would like to just put here, I mean, presentations here are not endorsed by the Danish Medicines Agency, so it's not that we necessarily give you a stamp of approval by featuring here, and you need to adhere to some of these requirements up here for you to be featured. And it will not be possible to present a solely commercial offering. Obviously, we're not in the game of providing that platform for you. But for some of these cases, we are definitely looking at very new, innovative solutions that I think we owe it to each other to make the best use of the innovation we're doing, and also look at how that can actually advance the life science field, the regulatory, the drug development, and the data science field as fast forward as possible. So I think with those words, I've covered basically the introduction remarks I wanted to give here today. And then probably leave it for our invited speakers from Accumulus Synergy to take us through the topic today on some of those interesting new advances within data sharing and cloud technology, all in the setting of giving access to clinical research data for the purpose of approving new medicines. So over to you.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for those of you listening all over the world. My name is Francisco Noguera. I'm the CEO of Accumulus, and we're very excited to be speaking to you today. And my colleague Christine will be joining me, and Mike and Paul, and we'll be going through the slides. And while we have some slides to share with you, I think one of the important things is that we want an interactive discussion, and I think the richness will come through the Q&A process. So Christine, if you don't mind, go to the next slide, please. And Lars, also thank you to you and Jesper for inviting us. And so what we're going to start with is talk to you a little bit about Accumulus Synergy's vision and approach, and then about a touch on the use cases. And why we think the use case sharing with you is important is while our vision and our mission are critical to everything we do, we believe that sharing with you some of the more tangible components of the work we're thinking through are equally important. And so we're going to do both and hope to paint for you a full picture of what is going on. So next slide, please. So I wanted to share with you the fact that Accumulus Synergy is now a non-for-profit company that was formed last June, July, and we are progressing rapidly, and we're in the stage of not only having a bit more clarity of what we want to do, but the detail behind it. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So I wanted to share with you today, first, a couple thoughts. One is around where we believe the burning platform is. So why are we doing this? And we fundamentally believe at Accumulus Synergy that there's really a need for change. And we think that both industry and regulatory agencies are recognizing that there's a need for change, and part of that is perhaps a combination of a number of elements. And let me walk you through what a couple of those elements look like. One is, and you would probably fully agree with this, is there's an increased complexity of data and evidence. And we know you're in the midst of this, and you're one of the leaders in thinking about how we do this differently. We also believe that there's a challenge around how do we enable global collaboration so that it's not siloed in the way it's approached. And I think there's a general sense, whether it's through the sponsor companies or HTAs in Europe, around the world, around escalating development costs and how do we address things like that. And lastly, I will say that there's this really, I think, key need for drive in keeping up with the pace of medical innovation, right? Whether it's gene therapy or CAR T-cell therapy, all around the world, I think things are changing. And so what are some of those changes or challenges? And where do we see some of the inefficiencies and complexities today? We see some of that around locked data sets and manual processes. I think you would all agree, whether it's at your agency or at the sponsor companies, I can share with you that there are a significant amount of manual processes that are not value added. We also want to look at how do we remove some of the complexities around event-driven interactions, single events that are fixed in time, but could we do those differently? And then also reliance on narrative and textual elements. How do we uncouple ourselves from purely that? And then lastly, company or health authority specific solutions. We see still today many solutions that are only for a particular health authority or driven by a particular company, and we'd like to look at that differently. So assuming this is our burning flat platform, if we can go to the next slide, please. What do we need to do? And we think there's a number of things that would be really helpful in terms of the work we want to set out to do. So some of it is around from to shift. And if you can think with me for a minute, today, let's assume for a minute we're going to go from to, and we need to go from organizational and regional silos to harmonized work across geographies. We'd really like to touch and to a great extent change how we look at rigid sequencing and event-driven interactions to real-time communication and synchronized collaboration. And then overall, just a lack of automation in all the work we do. And how do we change that from a lack of automation to really aggregate granular and actionable data? And we think the cloud capability is at the center of a lot of it, whether it's through secure shared space and dynamic permissioning, intelligent insights and automation, user-friendly content archives, etc. So we think the future is full of possibilities if we can harness them appropriately. Next slide, please. So what are we going to do at Accumulus, in the context of what I shared with you? So we have a vision, and we know the visions are both long-term and to a great extent aspirational. But one of the reasons we get up early in the morning at Accumulus Synergy is really to make a difference. And that difference, as we see it, is to dramatically accelerate critical therapies to citizens of the world. And we're being broad, and we think dramatic will come over time when we look back, not tomorrow, not next year, but over time. We believe it's around therapies and citizens of the world because we believe it's not only for US or Europe, et cetera, it's for everyone. And that we believe it's also for not only for patients, but also for those who may become a patient. And I think the example of the vaccines today, most people, thankfully, who are getting the vaccine for COVID are not patients. I think there's just citizens of the world who don't want to get sick. And then if that's a component of the high level, then there's a second component, which is around our mission. And we want to reimagine the interaction and information exchange between stakeholders and the healthcare ecosystem to a great extent streamline the regulatory lifecycle. And it really is about the entire lifecycle. And if we take those two, the vision and mission around the what, then we touch a little bit on the approach, which is the how. And how is that, we want to build solutions that facilitate real-time, simultaneous, and global submissions, both the reviews, the assessments of those therapies as well. And we hope that builds for you a little bit of a picture of where our head is, again, why we wake up every morning and why we do what we do at Accumulus Synergy. If we can go to the next slide, please. So if we're going to do this, we need to do this in our mind, at least in the short term, in three different, let's call them swim lanes for lack of a better word. And one of the swim lanes is the ability to disrupt the document-based review. and we mean disrupt in the most positive of ways. It's really to transform how we look at document-based reviews. Today, again, data is very, let's call it congealed in those documents, and how do we begin to look at those documents differently? The second one is around accelerating continuous data-driven review. So more of real-time sharing of data between sponsors and health authorities. And then the third is around how do we facilitate simultaneous global activity. And you'll hear from our colleague Christine in a couple of minutes around what that looks like in initially the parallel review space, but then over time in a more global real-time collaboration platform. If we can go to the next slide, please. So I think a transformation of the submission process can enable a dynamic approach, but it needs to shift the focus from documents over time to data, as I shared with you. And we wanted to illustrate this diagram for you just to give you a sense of there's kind of three main components to what we refer as our cloud vision. One of it is around our sponsor-only space. So sponsors would not only have a space within their cloud area, but they would even have indication rooms or molecule rooms where the data sits. There'd be kind of a middle space around where sponsors and health regulators exchange information, exchange thoughts, exchange feedback, etc. And then a regulator-only space. And that regulator-only space, I think, is really important because I think you as a Danish Medicines Agency, I presume, would want the space only for you, where you can do your own analytics, where you can do your own data review, etc. We believe over time that the regulator-only space will also permit regulators to speak among themselves. So if you need to speak to another regulator within the EU community or directly back to EMA or, I don't know, to Health Canada, you should be able to do that within your own regulator-only space. And we believe that the dynamics here will be both fluid, but highly regulated. We believe that there be, as you can imagine, true concern and parameters around data security and patient confidentiality, which we're taking extremely seriously as we build all this. If you can go to the next slide, please. So as we go, I think I've shared with you a little bit around the burning platform, what Accumulus Synergy is set out to do, some of the components of the work we want to do, but I also wanted to share with you a little bit of the fact that it takes a village. And so today we have, and we're proud to have, 10 major pharma companies who are both our sponsors, who provide us so much of the know-how and the funding for us to operate over the next 2 to 3 years. We have a significant amount of engagement and I would say co-collaboration from our global health authorities, including FDA, and EMA, and MHRA, and others. We are working actively with some of the world's top technology players in the cloud space, and we're actually running proof of concepts with them as we speak today, real time. And we're engaging actively with other stakeholders, and those include sister organizations like Transcelerate, but then also consortiums and other industry forum who we're collaborating with actively. And we want to do this because we believe if we're going to transform a way of working, it has to be together. There has to be a change management component. There has to be a component of excitement, and there has to be a drive towards that change. If we can go to the next slide, please. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues and friends at Accumulus Synergy, who are both working on a parallel review use case and also the CMC. So I'm going to turn it over to Christine, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, thank you.
Over to you, Christine.
Thank you very much. So today I wanted to share with you a bit of detail around the 2 prioritized use cases that Accumulus Synergy is currently working on. I'm going to focus on the parallel review, and then I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Mike, to talk to you about CMC. As Frank had mentioned to you previously, Accumulus has a number of core platform capabilities that we believe will be foundational for this platform. As we think about the core capabilities, we recognize that it's going to be important for us to activate those core capabilities. And the best way for us to do that is through the development of several use cases. So we had prioritized a number of use cases that would help us to develop those core platform capabilities. And the two that we prioritized to move forward first were the parallel review shared space use case and the CMC data-driven stability submissions use case. The parallel review use case is really focused on information exchange and how do we understand and change interactions during review. The CMC data-driven use case is really focused on data exchange and how do we make data more accessible and usable. What I'd like to do now is focus on the parallel review use case. Our scope for parallel review is to enable concurrent collaborative review of submissions among global health authorities or within agency committees or divisions. Now, collaboration between health authorities is not something new. It's actually been ongoing for a number of years. Anywhere from information sharing to sharing regulatory workload to assessment exchange. And there are a couple of examples of parallel review initiatives that you may or may not already be aware of. The first is the Access Consortium, started back in 2007, which is a coalition of regulatory authorities that work together and share regulatory workload across therapeutic areas. Another example is Project Orbis. This is an FDA initiative started back in 2019 that provides a framework for concurrent submissions and review of oncology products among international partners. When we decided to move forward with parallel review, we decided that we were going to focus on Project Orbis. And Project Orbis would allow us access to health authorities who have knowledge of parallel reviews. We also used our sponsor subject matter experts to better understand what key features are required for a parallel review shared space use case. And on the left-hand side of this slide, you can see a number of key features that were identified in collaboration with health authorities and sponsors. So at the top, you can see it's absolutely critical for us to have a secure shared space that will facilitate sponsor to health authority and health authority to health authority information exchange and communication. Also, a key feature is dynamic permissioning rules that will allow participants to define access rights. This is particularly important when you think about patient data and IP rights. Collaboration and workflow tools that will enable seamless sponsor to health authority and health authority to health authority engagement, another key feature, as well as project management tools and archives and tagging, parsing, and cataloging that will convert document submissions to a searchable database. We believe that these key features of a parallel review shared space will deliver short-term and long-term value to both health authorities and sponsors from the perspective of streamlining the submission process that will reduce drug lag across geographies, enhancing scientific review and improving efficiencies, enabling a more consistent and consolidated sets of feedback from our health authorities, and simplifying health authority to health authority communication channels. The approach that we took when we looked at parallel review use case was really to connect with our Project Orbis health authorities and sponsors who are familiar with Project Orbis to map out the current Project Orbis workflow. And when we did that, we identified three high-value areas that we believe we can change and evolve ways of working. Those three areas are assessment aid creation and information exchange, collaborative review, and information requests. What we decided to do was map the process, identify pain points, and then identify example features that we could use to address those pain points. And you can see a number of features listed here on this slide. There were so many features that we believed we could bring forward and bring forward into new ways of working that we decided we can't tackle all of these right now. We actually have to prioritize some of these features and create a solution, an early solution that will allow us to demonstrate value. And so what we decided was those features that you can see here bolded were put into a prototype, a parallel review prototype that would essentially bring the concept to life. It would allow us to demonstrate some of these features and allow both health authorities and sponsors to see the value in a parallel review use case. On this next slide, what I'd like to do is show a short video that really brings to life a few of the key features that we built into the parallel review prototype.
Welcome. Today we will be demonstrating the parallel review use case prototype. We begin our demonstration from the perspective of a parallel review facilitator. A sponsor organization has just submitted a completed assessment aid form to the facilitators team, and they will now invite the appropriate health authorities to participate in the review. Once the user is logged into the parallel review application space, they will land on the application homepage. The homepage will include a role-based dashboard and will change throughout the lifecycle of the application to fit the needs of the user. Currently, all applications and documents are managed manually through email and SharePoint. The new dashboard feature will help to reduce email and phone traffic and streamline communication between all participating organizations. Parallel review facilitators will have insights into the overall application status, as well as a view of upcoming milestones and application activity. Facilitators will also have the ability to invite health authorities to participate in the review. Once the invitations are sent, the facilitator will be able to track the status of each invited organization. Now, we will begin logging in from the perspective of a Health Authority Project Manager, or HAPM for short. Before the HAPM has accepted the invite to participate in the review, they will have limited access to the application. This limited dashboard will include application overview and select documents needed to inform their decision. The HAPM can accept and confirm the invitation to participate by clicking the Accept button. Once the invite has been accepted, they will be granted full access to the homepage. The HAPM will be operating within their organization's own secure space. The dashboard will show metrics specific to their organization's review. On the dashboard, the HAPM will be able to view application specifics, milestones, and activity, along with an assessment aid review status tracker. The HAPM can initiate the review of the assessment aid by clicking this button. Once the HAPM has initiated their review, they can click into the library to view the document. The application library is split into 3 subsections. We are currently viewing the AAID, which is broken down by section. The HAPM will be able to see the title, tags, status, and assignees of each section. The HAPM can assign a reviewer to a section by clicking on the Assign Reviewers dropdown and choosing the appropriate participant. Assigned reviewers will get a notification that they have been assigned to a section. The HAPM can click into a section of the document. Once in an assessment aid section, the HAPM will have the ability to view section content and add or reply to comments. Within the comments panel, the HAPM will have the ability to keep a comment internal to their organization or share the comment with other participating health authorities. The HAPM will also have the ability to create and submit information requests to the sponsor. The HAPM will be able to track the status of all information requests sent across health authorities on the homepage. The HAPM can also access these documents within the Information Request tab of the library. Here, the HAPM can also create a new information request. Once in the creation page, the HAPM will be able to fill out information request specifics. Once the HAPM has finished drafting the information request, they can click to share the document with other participating health authorities for a 24-hour review period or expedite directly to the sponsor. The sponsor will be able to respond to the information request within the Accumulus platform, and the health authorities will be notified when a response has been received.
So hopefully that short video gives you a sense of our parallel review use case. This prototype and the development of the prototype, along with health authorities and sponsor companies, resulted in a tremendous number of learnings that we're applying to our next phase, which includes demonstrating technical feasibility for the solution, as well as identifying the scope for our minimum viable product. Now I'm going to hand it off to my colleague Mike to talk to you about the CMC use case.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you for having us today. Really appreciate the opportunity to be able to present the Accumulus vision and the CMC use case. So what I would like to do is walk you through the CMC use case, and then I'll turn it back to Frank to conclude with the overall Accumulus vision. But before I get into the actual details of the stability CMC use case, I want to paint a picture of the challenges that we deal with today. And specifically the challenges associated with the chemistry manufacturing controls module. And if you look at the common technical document, there's 145 nodes or so, 45 nodes or so that make up module 3. And if you split those nodes into 5 to 10 documents each on average, and then you have 3 authoring events, followed by 3 review events, and then 3 data verification events, you're looking at about a total of 10,000 events to build the CMC module. And that's only the building of the first CMC module of many that would go out to the entire world if you're a global biotech or pharmaceutical company. Additionally, the manual processing and the manipulation of module 3 leads to errors and the perpetuation of those errors throughout multiple filings around the world. Third, the management of lifecycle management results in many different flavors or challenges for module 3 in each module 3 section. So you can imagine what the registered details would look like for module 3 for a filing that had been submitted to 80+ individual health authorities. Additionally, there are limited capabilities of exchanging content and data in a PDF format. Essentially, PDF is unusable, and we need to find a better way of working. And then finally, the management of life cycle is burdensome for not only the sponsor, but also the health authority in managing the documentation and the content that might be tied to a product that had been on the market for 20+ years. So you might imagine a simple solution is to have a single global health authority that could review a single application. However, we know due to economic and legal challenges, that is probably never going to be the case. However, our industry has made great strides to harmonize and evolve the regulatory filing from national-based paper filings to universal electronic filings through the ICH Common Technical Document. However, we have not addressed the granular and repetitive nature of Module 3 and must, in the future, improve our ability to leverage content and data through a more optimized filing and review process. Accumulus can provide this platform. And on the next slide, I want to share with you specifically the CMC use case. So the CMC use case will meet all of the expectations of parallel review that Christine defined or described to you today, but it will also address the data and content and repetitive usage challenges with Module 3. What we hope to do is take electronic content components or narrative, which typically manually processed and then repetitively processed into each respective application, and marry those electronic content components up with integrated automated data and provide that content and data in a usable format to the reviewer and sponsor. I think by standardizing and automating Module 3, the number of events will significantly be reduced. Data errors will also be all but eliminated. And then lifecycle management will become much more efficient and manageable than it is today. So picture this. Files could be built concurrently. They could be built once with the option to pick regional specific components or data that could be applied to meet all of the global filing requirements. Submissions can also be made through the Accumulus web-based portal and then reviewed in parallel. With the CMC use case, we will explore these capabilities through stability. And what we hope to do with stability, and the reason that we chose stability, is that stability has a right-sized data set. In addition, stability is found within each of the respective filings, whether it's during development as a CTA, whether it's part of the marketing application, or whether it's found in a lifecycle filing with a tech transfer or potential scale-up. Stability data is essentially core to most all CMC filings. Additionally, CMC is rate limiting, and if we can progress the CMC data in a more efficient and effective manner and save time, we'll hopefully be able to get these much needed therapies to patients in a more streamlined and effective manner. And so by showing that we are able to streamline the CMC data aspects and the CMC content, we hope to scale that up. And on the next slide, you can see how this can be applicable to all of Module 3. If we can take and make our stability data usable and pair that with electronic components within the stability modules of P81, 82, and 83, and S71, 72, and 73, we should be able to apply these same principles to all of Module 3. And not only that, with the next slide, you can see how the application of these principles in the Accumulus vision to the stability data can be applied to Module 3, and then it can be applied beyond Module 3 and into essentially any aspect of the regulatory filing. And you can see that with this, you'll have the aspects described by Christine in parallel review, where reviews can be done concurrently by health authorities. The structured content and data will be supplied to the health authority and be exchanged between health authority and sponsor in a readily usable format. The filings will be data-driven and the reviews can be done in real time. This allows for simultaneous submission and review of regulatory filings in real time. And this is the direction that we're headed with the CMC use case in hopes of achieving the Accumulus vision. With that, I'll pass it on to Frank. You may be on mute, Frank.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Christine. And I hope our colleagues at the Danish Medicines Agency and others watching us today got a little bit of a glimpse into Accumulus Synergy. I hope that you're as excited as we are. We believe we're doing something new. I think we're the first company, a non-for-profit company, to attempt to change how industry works and how the health authorities and regulators can work differently. And we hope that you share our excitement. So beyond a note of gratitude to you, we also wanted to have some questions for you, which we pose on the screen, but I presume there might be already questions popping up on either YouTube or through the Danish Medicines Agency. So I'll pause here and see if you want to maybe touch on these questions, Lars, or should we go to questions that are being queued up?
Yes, there are no questions at this moment. Or maybe some have some questions, but just haven't written in the chat yet.
But I think we could probably get started from here. So thank you for the presentation. Also the video showing a little bit of the actual tool in there. Really appreciate that, and also the vision and the expectations for the benefits that you could see this collaborative platform could potentially play in as a role in the future. And it probably leads me into some of the elements here where you bring forward the touch points to the agency's goals. It's how mindful are you about the process support in there that relates to the current processes and the change management that would inevitably have to happen at the different regulatory agency on a global scale, because technology will now inform of a new way of working. And how do you see that path by developing out further use cases or approaching it in a bigger scheme? What is your kind of change management approach towards the agencies? Because I think you're actually somewhat provoking our way of working with some of these technology initiatives. So shedding a little bit of light on that, then we can talk about the touch points potentially.
Yeah, thank you, Jesper. I think we're doing that in two fundamental approaches. One is with the agencies that are currently working with us already today, we are going on a journey together. So it's a journey not only of change management, but it's a journey of co-creation, because we believe as we co-create, we evolve together. And I think that's been proven to be very helpful. And we do that by not only just the work we're doing today, but also showing kind of a maturity model of where we want to get together. So it takes people along that journey of, okay, there's a number of steps to get to this beautiful endpoint, not tomorrow, but here's the logical steps to get there. So I think one is the ability to co-create and really work together to bring that co-creation to life. But the second one, and this is, I think, a work to credit to Mike and Christine, that they've really been talking to the technology platform enterprises about, is how do we build something that you don't have to be at the bleeding edge in order to use it? How do we build something that could take a PDF as well as it could take a data set, as well as it could take a combination of both, right? Because we believe no matter how much co-creation we do, no matter how much change management we're going to develop, agencies and sponsors alike will be at a different maturity model of what they can do, how they can do it, and when they can do it. And so we want to be adaptable to both. So that's our current thinking. But certainly, as you know, change management takes time and effort and lots of energy. But that's our two paradigms that we're operating under.
But that's a very good point, calling out that we are at different levels of maturity. And I think those from the industry side that know what it takes to do a submission, either in the US, in Japan, or in Europe, will know the differences, even though there's ICH and the ECTD and the harmonization that has been occurring. There are differences, right, in what we do, but especially within the European realm, I would see there's an opportunity to discuss that co-creation, because I think none of us wants to create a third paradigm, a third level of detail. But obviously invite for a discussion where somewhere in the future, not too distant future, we need to look at how we can actually utilize technology to support what is really an efficient process, yet still bear in mind those important differences that you do see when it comes to regulations and to local law, or what the expectations are, because obviously some of that is stuff we all need to adhere to for good reasons. So I appreciate your take on saying that there will never, or potentially not for the near future, be a global submission as such. But the opening here where you kind of elaborate on this platform to share it, I think is promising. What are initial takeaways from discussions with regulatory agencies? I could imagine that people could be, this is fine, but it's not invented here, or this is fine, but we've already invested heavily in some infrastructure that is there, and we are now using that. What is your expectations, and what is your experiences when discussing with those agencies that are already involved in raw data submissions, as an example?
Yes, and just so I want to answer your question, but I also just wanted to touch on the point you made before. I think many of us have lived through the journey, and maybe we're dating ourselves, but from paper submissions to non-electronic ECTDs, so the NICEs, and then to ECTD, et cetera, right? So we know that the journey takes time. We know that there's steps along the way. So we're fully supportive of what you just said as well, Jesper. In terms of, not invented here, or, we've already invested internally, we're hearing that, also from even the sponsor companies, not the non-invented here part, but we've already invested a lot internally. And our reaction to that is that's great, because I think as you invest internally, you're beginning to digitize, to transform, to really modernize the internal infrastructure, and we can all only benefit from that. For us, at the end of the day, for Accumulus Synergy, it's all in benefit of patients. And if the infrastructure is modernizing, that modernization is going to seep through in many ways, and we're absolutely okay with that, because we want to be able to touch companies in different ways at different times in their modernization, let's call it that. So we are absolutely okay with that. The non-invented here part, I think, is a little bit more challenging. What we're hoping to do is either through co-creation, then it is invented here, or if it's not invented here, because you can't co-create with every health authority in the world. That's just not realistic. We're hoping to show value. We're hoping to show value not only for reducing complexity for some of the things you do, and as Mike shared, I'm hoping, and I would submit to you that if we can, reduce the complexity and the inefficiency today around how we manage CMC data. I'm hoping that if we said to you, hey, Jesper, even though you weren't part of this co-creation, but look at how much we can streamline, look at how much efficiency we can build for the Danish Medicines Agency, and knowing you that in your thinking for patients, you'd say, wow, at minimum, I'm curious to know more. And that's our hope, is to bring value.
Great. I think not to neglect Gabriel, who just brought forward a question, but I think I would actually just like to catch that Annette post one that is around. It is difficult to imagine if the legal basis and guidelines are different. Do you have any reflections on that? So our ability to actually develop something that works for all regulatory agencies if our legal basis and guidelines are different. How do you see that? How would you deal with that, this heterogeneity on a global scale?
And this is in part why we're both excited, because we're the first, and we're both, and we're also really curious on how we're going to tackle this in a way that no one has ever done before. We know it's complex. We know there's a significant amount of heterogeneity. What we want to do is tackle the most common denominator, right? So security and patient privacy. I think those are paramount. We think those are in common with every health agency around the world. And then from that, I think we're going to have to adapt how each of them have their nuance. We haven't fully, I think, digested that, Jesper, to be completely clear here. But I think if we believe it's kind of the 80-20 rule. If we can have clear patient level security and data security, we think we probably catch 80% of the concerns. And then we have to go, I think, case by case to address the remainder.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's going to be a lot of work. I think we'll agree to that, but appreciate that you go ahead first in trying to address it. The other question that Gabriel brought up, I think is more technical related, whether you're operating with any specific data formats that you're focusing on, or is it more like universal within the reasonable limits, of course, as he's asking here. So I think that goes to, is it CDISC? Is it OMOP? Is it FHIR? I mean, what kind of data standards are you considering that are at play here? ISO IDMP? I mean, what is the goal initially and for the future?
And I don't know if my colleagues Mike or Christine wanted to answer, and if not, I can take a first pass at that.
Yeah, so Frank, I think the best answer at this point is working with our technical vendors to figure out an optimal format. We know that it has to be outside of the PDF, and it has to be in a format that is usable to both the health authority and sponsor. FHIR is a possibility, but we want to make sure that it proves successful and useful to both sponsor and health authority.
Mm-hmm. So still work in progress to look at that.
It is, but I think, as I think Mike was alluding to, our general principle is we want to be more inclusive of different data types than restrictive, because we believe it's in that inclusivity that brings the value. And again, that change management curve along that maturity model, different companies may be working on different things. And then also at times it even depends on a particular sponsor's, therapeutic area focus, right? That could also have an impact on what type of formats they submit, whether it's video or digital or just data. We want to be able to accommodate all of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So any near-time considerations for, I think, taking it beyond a use case and into an actual test submission, is that on the roadmap? Not that you need to disclose with who and how, but is it there within the next year or so to try that out?
Yeah, I think you probably see me and again my colleague Christine smiling, who's working actively on this. So yes, we have an internal goal, and we didn't get into the goals, but I'm happy to share that our goal is that by the end of the year we will have one submission from a sponsor through Accumulus to a health authority. We're working through now the timing and which agency, and based on timing, where in the portfolio of our sponsor companies how that would work. But our goal is that by the end of the year we have a first submission to really showcase, I think, what is possible, and then go from there.
That could definitely be interesting, not only to watch but to participate in. So obviously, feel free to reach out, and we can connect some of the dots as we're discussing here. So hoping my colleagues at EMA are listening within the big data steering group and the initiatives we are moving fast forward ahead with in that space, right? So. But I think this has been really interesting to hear you elaborate a little bit more about. And also, I think none of us can disagree with the vision of saying that if we can come to more efficient ways of sharing data by still preserving the individual's privacy, accelerating what it then means to develop new drugs and get them safely approved with as much data as possible, and also, as you pointed out, getting to the point where we can potentially look at the data earlier, continuously, and also then look at how sharing data can actually further improve our ability to keep monitoring the safety of the drugs that is getting approved. I think that is something that all of us can agree to. So as long as we stay under that umbrella, I don't think we'll disagree. If we can come to a point in time where the co-creation will truly happen while we keep our arm's length principle and our independency as regulatory agency, obviously, to make our own opinion without any interruption, without any look into how we evaluate the data. I think that is obviously where we need to end up at. But knowing what cloud technology can do, I feel somewhat comfortable that that is a journey we need to take. And I think from the industry side, we only need to go 3 or 4 years back where the uncertainty around cloud technology was really dominant in the industry as well, and not something people really wanted to embrace. So I think we're probably maturing in trusting encryption and privacy in cloud technology. Right. So really appreciate the opportunity we had here today to learn from that. So and I think we alluded to some of the points you brought forward here for the discussion, and also fed back a few questions to you. And I probably would like to keep, for those watching this later, keep the channel open, that in case any questions do come along, I'm pretty confident we can pass them on to you. If someone comes with the $1 million question that needs to be answered, right? So we'll make sure we do that. And in terms of other feedback for you, I think best of luck. Keep us in the loop, and let's discuss how to co-create. I think we would all be in that area where we find that really interesting to do that. So,
well, I think on behalf of Accumulus Synergy, just thank you for your time. If we would love to come back again when you would like us back. And I think, I think we talked a little bit summertime, I think would be wonderful because we'd have even more to share and more to work through. But in the meantime, it doesn't stop us from working with your agency in components of what we can co-create together. So I would love subsequent discussions, because I think even in the CMC space, I think there's a real opportunity there that we can think differently. And when we think of CMC, we internally at Accumulus Synergy believe it's not just CMC, it's really around data management. And so we'd love to continue the dialogue. So thank you from our side as well.
Thank you. So I think that will conclude our session today. Thank you for those listening in, and for those watching on the internet, and for those of you watching it a little bit later. I hope you enjoyed what you saw, and do feel free to reach out to us, or for this specific topic, the good folks from Accumulus. So thank you, Mike. Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Frank. And thank you, Paul, for taking the time to present this here with us today.